The gavel struck sharply, echoing like thunder, as Judge Richard declared the verdict that left the courtroom frozen. Anna, the guarded survivor, sat stiffly, her hands trembling as she clutched the bench, eyes darting to Michael, who leaned forward with calm resolve that masked unspoken tension. Liam shifted restlessly, his glare bouncing between David and Evelyn, as though he sensed truths hidden in their silence. David's steady frame remained composed, his gaze locked on Anna, while Evelyn's poised smile flickered faintly, unreadable yet menacing. At the back, a haunting presence stirred, the memory of Claire frozen in time, lingering like a shadow no one dared mention. The silence became unbearable until Anna whispered, "This isn't justice, it's a trap," and Michael answered softly, "Then someone must speak the truth, before it's too late." The weight of silence pressed heavily after Judge Richard's verdict, and the whispers in the gallery grew sharper. Anna sat frozen, her chest tight, while Michael's steady voice broke the tension with quiet reassurance. Liam leaned back, arms crossed, muttering that the truth was being buried alive, his eyes darting toward Evelyn, whose flawless composure never wavered. David shifted subtly, his presence calm but unreadable, while the faint memory of Claire seemed to ripple in Anna's mind like a melody only she could hear. As Anna's pulse quickened, she realized this courtroom was no longer just about justice but about survival, and her whispered words carried more weight than the gavel itself. Anna tried to breathe, but each sound felt louder than the silence. Michael whispered gently that truth often survived in shadows. Liam scoffed, sketching lines furiously, claiming shadows swallowed more than they saved. Evelyn glanced briefly at David, their unspoken exchange tightening the air, while Judge Richard hammered order again. The ghostly trace of Claire lingered above them all, a reminder of what had already been lost. Anna's eyes shimmered, caught between the living and the memory, when she murmured that speaking meant bleeding. David's voice cut through, calm yet resolute, telling Anna that sometimes silence was the loudest scream. Anna stared at him, torn between trust and fear, while Michael urged her not to let despair consume her. Liam muttered that the walls themselves were listening, his restless sketching never stopping. Evelyn's smile deepened, as if savoring Anna's hesitation, and Judge Richard's gaze bore down with unyielding authority. Claire's haunting memory hummed like a soft echo, reminding Anna of the letter she had never opened, a secret that still ached inside her. The tension thickened as Anna's hand hovered over her bag, fingers brushing the sealed letter she had hidden for years. Michael's calm presence reminded her that truth weighed less when shared, but Evelyn's piercing gaze warned of chains unseen. Liam blurted that secrets never stayed buried, earning Judge Richard's gavel slamming for silence. David's steady eyes anchored the moment, yet Anna could feel Claire's memory circling her like a whisper of fate. With a trembling breath, Anna realized the verdict was only the beginning, and the real trial had just begun. The courthouse corridor stretched endlessly as Anna's footsteps echoed faintly against cold marble. Michael walked beside her, speaking softly that courage often began in trembling hands. Liam leaned against the wall, sketchbook pressed close, muttering that lies dressed as truth still stank of decay. David approached with steady calm, reminding Anna that standing still could mean surrender. Evelyn appeared from the shadows, offering a smile that felt both comforting and venomous, her presence tightening the air. Judge Richard's words lingered in Anna's mind like a blade, while Claire's haunting memory seemed to glide with them unseen. Anna whispered that silence felt safer, yet Michael warned that silence was already killing her. Anna paused near the courthouse doors, her eyes darting between the fading sunlight outside and the tightening grip of dread within. Michael told her that sometimes justice was a storm one had to walk through. Liam kicked at the wall impatiently, saying storms often drowned the ones unprepared. Evelyn stepped closer, touching Anna's arm lightly, her words sweet but her gaze sharp with hidden intent. David's calm voice cut through, reminding them all that the cost of truth was always higher than expected. Claire's memory whispered through Anna's thoughts, the faint sound of humming twisting into the air. Anna breathed heavily, knowing her next step could change everything. The air grew heavier as Anna confessed in a hushed voice that she held proof, hidden for years. Michael's eyes sharpened, urging her to reveal it before shadows consumed the chance. Liam's head snapped up, curiosity and defiance mingling as he muttered that secrets rotted faster than wounds. Evelyn leaned in with measured calm, promising protection, her smile slicing like glass. David shifted subtly, his gaze unreadable, as though calculating outcomes quietly. Judge Richard's booming order from the hallway demanded silence, but Anna's pulse only roared louder. Claire's presence lingered, her faint outline flickering, reminding Anna of promises left broken. Anna's voice cracked as she whispered that the sealed letter in her bag could expose everything. Michael steadied her trembling hand, urging that truth was not meant to be buried forever. Liam stepped forward suddenly, eyes bright, saying secrets written on paper screamed louder than voices. Evelyn folded her arms, her tone smooth as silk, warning that truth often shattered more lives than lies. David glanced down, silent yet heavy with contemplation, his calm expression hiding past compromises. Judge Richard's footsteps echoed closer, bringing the weight of the law into the hallway. Claire's ghostly memory lingered at Anna's side, as though urging her to open what she feared. The hallway grew suffocating as Anna pulled the letter halfway out, her breath shaking. Michael whispered firmly that once truth escaped, there was no pulling it back. Liam leaned closer, eyes burning, declaring that lies were already choking them. Evelyn's voice softened like velvet, promising safety if Anna chose silence. David's steady tone carried a warning that sacrifices might soon be demanded. Judge Richard's stern figure entered the corridor, eyes narrowing at the sight. Claire's memory shimmered faintly, as though her frozen smile urged Anna to finish what had been left undone. Anna's pulse hammered louder than the echoing footsteps, and she felt the weight of choice pressing down. The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters as Anna clutched her bag tighter, the letter hidden within like a burning coal. Michael shielded her path, telling her that truth feared the light but demanded it anyway. Liam sketched hurried lines, muttering that wolves had sharper teeth when cornered. Evelyn stood poised before microphones, her words flowing like silk as she called for patience. David lingered at the edge, speaking softly that silence in chaos was still a choice. Judge Richard exited with stern authority, warning all to respect the process. Claire's ghostly memory hovered in Anna's mind, a silent plea urging her not to falter. The crowd pressed closer, cameras flashing as Anna's breath came faster. Michael whispered urgently that fear was meant to be carried, not surrendered to. Liam pushed forward, saying loudly that masks always cracked under pressure. Evelyn raised her hand gracefully, asking the press for calm, though her eyes locked onto Anna with quiet threat. David steadied himself, reminding Anna that once spoken, words carved their own path. Judge Richard's glare silenced the crowd for a moment, yet questions kept rising like smoke. Claire's memory stirred again, her humming blending into the din, urging Anna toward a choice she still resisted. Anna finally gasped that she had something the court needed, and the words froze everyone. Michael's eyes blazed with resolve, saying it was time to reveal the weight she carried. Liam's voice cut sharp, claiming that everyone already smelled the rot behind polished lies. Evelyn stepped closer, her smile unchanging as she warned that not all truths deserve to live. David folded his arms, speaking evenly that history judged silence far more than words. Judge Richard ordered calm, yet his hand tightened on his robe nervously. Claire's presence shimmered like a broken reflection, her frozen youth pressing Anna to speak fully. Anna's voice shook as she admitted the letter contained names tied to Claire's disappearance. Michael urged her firmly that secrets had destroyed enough lives already. Liam stepped closer, demanding loudly that everyone deserved to know the truth. Evelyn's expression hardened briefly before her smile returned like a blade hidden in silk. David spoke calmly that justice weighed heavy, but denying it was worse. Judge Richard's face stiffened, his eyes betraying knowledge he would not admit aloud. Claire's ghostly memory shimmered brighter, her presence now almost beside Anna, urging the letter to see the light. The crowd erupted as Anna's voice cracked, declaring that the truth would no longer stay buried. Michael steadied her, warning that once revealed, nothing would remain the same. Liam cheered with raw defiance, claiming lies were finally being burned away. Evelyn's smile fractured, her calm mask slipping as her eyes narrowed dangerously. David spoke gravely that storms had begun, and sacrifices would be demanded before dawn. Judge Richard slammed his hand down for silence, yet unease crept across his face. Claire's memory hovered above Anna's trembling figure, her silent plea finally turning into a guiding force. The sealed letter trembled in Anna's hand as the crowd leaned closer, their silence heavy with anticipation. Michael urged her quietly that truth once revealed could not be undone. Liam shouted that hiding it any longer was betrayal to Claire. Evelyn's voice dripped with grace as she warned that exposing names would break more than it mended. David stepped closer, his eyes dark with memory, whispering that he had once chosen silence and paid dearly. Judge Richard demanded order, but his shaking hand betrayed unease. Claire's presence glimmered behind Anna, her frozen smile urging the letter into the open. Anna unfolded the letter, her breath shallow, and the crowd gasped as names spilled into the air. Michael's jaw tightened as he read the shadows woven into every line. Liam exclaimed that the guilty had always sat among them. Evelyn's eyes flashed before her calm mask returned, her tone dangerously sweet as she denied every word. David whispered that he had once known the truth but buried it to protect more than himself. Judge Richard's face blanched as his name appeared among the ink. Claire's memory shone brighter, her humming soft yet heavy, sealing the silence with haunting clarity. The crowd erupted as accusations flew, reporters screaming questions while cameras flashed relentlessly. Anna's voice cracked as she declared that Claire's disappearance was not an accident, but a silenced truth. Michael's steady hand supported her, insisting the truth had power to cleanse. Liam shouted fiercely that Evelyn and David had always known. Evelyn stepped forward, her elegance shattering for a heartbeat, her voice sharp as steel in denial. David bowed his head, speaking heavily that betrayal sometimes wore loyalty's face. Judge Richard slammed his gavel against the railing, but no order returned. Claire's ghostly presence stood brighter, her silence speaking louder than all. The storm broke as David's voice revealed he had sacrificed truth once for what he called the greater good. Anna's eyes filled with betrayal, whispering that trust had always been her last shield. Michael's calm turned into sharp words, accusing David of engineering silence. Liam snarled that Evelyn's hand was in everything, his young voice cutting like fire. Evelyn's calm demeanor shattered as she shouted that survival had its price. Judge Richard tried to retreat, but whispers of corruption swarmed him. Claire's memory pulsed like light through fog, her presence now undeniable, as if truth itself was rising through her. The revelation hung heavy as Anna collapsed to her knees, clutching the letter with tears mixing into rain. Michael knelt beside her, whispering that her courage had already broken chains. Liam raised his arms, shouting that Claire's silence had finally spoken. Evelyn turned away, her mask shattered, eyes burning with fury and fear. David's voice trembled as he admitted the weight of his betrayal had never left. Judge Richard stood frozen, the gavel limp in his hand, the authority drained from his face. Claire's memory hovered above Anna, her soft smile now guiding, her haunting presence binding truth with finality. The courtroom filled again, tension vibrating through every wooden beam as Anna stepped forward with the letter clutched in trembling hands. Michael's voice steadied her, telling her that courage only mattered when tested before fear itself. Liam slammed his notebook on the bench, shouting that the lies had already drowned too many voices. Evelyn's smile returned, sharp and calm, claiming that Anna's words were nothing but broken fragments. David lowered his head, whispering that he had helped bury the truth once, but not again. Judge Richard's gavel thundered, demanding silence, yet unease etched his every movement. Claire's memory hovered like a bright flame, guiding Anna's shaking resolve. Anna's voice cracked as she declared that Claire's disappearance had never been chance, but was silenced by those in power. Michael urged her on, his tone fierce, saying the letter was the key to unraveling it all. Liam pointed directly at Evelyn, yelling that masks could not hide guilt forever. Evelyn rose gracefully, her voice cold as she denied everything, her composure like polished stone. David finally admitted aloud that he had been complicit, his voice breaking under the weight. Judge Richard pounded his gavel, but sweat glistened on his brow. Claire's ghostly smile flickered, her presence almost radiant with truth unchained. The crowd inside erupted, reporters scribbling furiously as every eye turned to the accused. Anna's tears streaked her cheeks as she held the letter high, shouting that Claire's silence had been bought with betrayal. Michael's voice thundered that justice was not meant to serve power but truth. Liam cried out that Evelyn's hands were bloodied by secrets. Oh! Evelyn's mask cracked fully, her sharp voice spitting that survival was all that mattered. David's whisper shook the room as he admitted Evelyn had orchestrated the silence. Judge Richard stood frozen, his gavel falling from his hand. Claire's memory seemed to stand alive, her presence undeniable. Anna staggered but refused to stop, shouting that Claire's story would not remain buried. Michael steadied her, his arm firm across her shoulder, telling her the weight was now shared. Liam shouted defiantly that Evelyn's empire of lies was crumbling. Evelyn glared with venom, her composure gone, shouting that truth destroyed more than it saved. David's voice trembled as he begged Anna to let the truth stand without more blood. Judge Richard shouted desperately for order, yet his voice cracked under strain. Claire's memory shimmered near Anna, her silent song pushing courage into the collapsing room. The climax broke as Anna thrust the letter onto the judge's bench, her voice echoing with unshakable force. Michael declared loudly that justice had finally been unchained. Liam roared that the guilty would never hide again. Evelyn's fury erupted, her hands slamming the bench as she screamed denials. David dropped to his knees, his voice raw, confessing all that had been buried. Judge Richard froze, his eyes wide as he realized his authority was gone. Claire's ghostly figure smiled softly above Anna, her lingering presence transforming grief into final strength. The air trembled, the weight of truth impossible to silence. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as Anna's voice echoed, the letter resting on the bench like a weapon. Michael whispered firmly that the truth had been spoken, no matter the cost. Liam's fists shook as he shouted that no gavel could bury what was now alive. Evelyn sat rigid, her mask gone, her gaze simmering with fury. David admitted aloud that silence had chained him for years, and now the chain was broken. Judge Richard trembled, his authority shattering before the crowd's gaze. Claire's memory hovered brighter, her silent song filling the air, binding the moment with sorrow and resolve. Anna closed her eyes, whispering that Claire deserved peace and truth deserved breath. Michael steadied her with a firm nod, telling her courage had already torn the veil. Liam shouted to the press that Evelyn's power had always fed on silence. Evelyn sneered bitterly, her voice sharp, claiming justice was nothing more than a story for fools. David admitted in a trembling tone that he had traded loyalty for survival, his guilt raw in the air. Judge Richard's voice faltered as he declared the hearing adjourned. Claire's ghost shimmered stronger, her frozen smile now radiant with unspoken forgiveness. The crowd spilled out into the courthouse steps, the rain falling softly, as if cleansing the lies left behind. Anna stood beneath the downpour, whispering that the letter no longer belonged to her alone. Michael told her that truth, once freed, walked its own path. Liam lifted his sketchbook high, shouting that Claire's silence had spoken louder than thunder. Evelyn glared at the gathering reporters, her silence now her last weapon. David bowed his head, murmuring that guilt weighed heavier than chains. Judge Richard retreated quickly, his eyes hollow. Claire's ghost lingered over the steps, her presence woven into every drop of rain. Anna's tears blended with the rain as she whispered that the cost had been too high, yet silence would have been worse. Michael's calm tone assured her that Claire's memory was now unchained. Liam declared that even youth bore scars when lies ruled too long. Evelyn stood motionless, her fury hidden under a hollow smile. David stepped closer, admitting he wished he had spoken sooner, regret carving deep lines into his face. Judge Richard vanished into the courthouse shadows, authority reduced to silence. Claire's presence gleamed brighter, her memory now a guiding star above the broken storm. The storm eased as dawn's light crept across the courthouse, painting broken truths in pale gold. Anna whispered that justice had been spoken, though wounds would never fully heal. Michael nodded, saying that courage left scars but also carved paths forward. Liam raised his voice one final time, shouting that Claire would never again be forgotten. Evelyn turned away, her figure dissolving into the crowd, her power fractured beyond repair. David knelt on the steps, his voice raw with confession, pleading silently for forgiveness. Judge Richard stood in silence, powerless, his gavel no longer his weapon. Claire's memory shimmered softly, eternal in the morning light. The courthouse emptied slowly, leaving Anna standing alone with the rain-soaked steps behind her. Michael told her softly that survival and courage often looked the same when scars were left behind. Liam muttered bitterly that truth had teeth sharper than any lie. Evelyn watched from the distance, her eyes cold, her silence sharper than words. David stepped forward carefully, confessing that redemption was never guaranteed. Judge Richard lingered in the shadows, stripped of power yet unwilling to face the dawn. Claire's presence shimmered above the steps, her silent gaze reminding them all that justice was never clean, only endured. Anna whispered that the truth had spoken but left her hollow, like a wound unhealed. Michael replied that justice was never about comfort, but about weight carried forward. Liam declared that the guilty would never sleep without hearing Claire's name. Evelyn finally turned, her lips curving into a faint smile that carried no warmth, only threat. David looked toward the ground, his silence heavy with shame. Judge Richard exhaled deeply, his shoulders bent, his robe no longer a shield. Claire's ghost lingered brighter, her memory humming faintly like a lullaby meant for no one living. The night deepened, and Anna's steps slowed as she whispered that Claire had finally been heard. Michael kept close, promising that wounds became maps for those who came after. Liam said in a trembling voice that fear would not silence him again. Evelyn's eyes followed with unspoken promises of retribution, her silence dangerous. David finally admitted that he feared himself more than any verdict. Judge Richard disappeared into the darkness, his legacy fractured beyond repair. Claire's memory moved gently in the air, her frozen smile glowing, as if forgiveness and grief could exist in the same breath. Anna stopped beneath a street lamp, whispering that silence had once chained her but no longer. Michael answered that her voice had given Claire back to the world. Liam pressed his sketchbook into Anna's hand, saying the story was no longer hers to bear alone. Evelyn slipped away into the night, her figure dissolving like smoke into shadows. David remained, his regret written into every breath he took. Judge Richard's echo of footsteps faded, swallowed by the darkness he had served. Claire's memory lingered in the lamplight, her glow flickering like a final candle refusing to die. The final silence held as dawn broke faintly on the horizon, painting the street in pale silver. Anna whispered one last time that justice was never clean, but it was spoken. Michael placed a hand on her shoulder, promising that her scars would become her armor. Liam raised his eyes to the sky, declaring that Claire's name would live on in every breath. Evelyn's shadow lingered somewhere unseen, her threat unbroken. David remained still, silent with regret too heavy for words. Judge Richard had vanished, leaving powerless echoes behind. Claire's memory shimmered softly, her haunting smile echoing the truth that had finally been revealed.